Hi there, welcome to St Andrew's Church in Bebington on the Wirral Peninsula, which is where John Adamson is a member. My name's Callum, and we're going to be hearing a bit about John and the story behind his books, including his latest release, The Deceiver. We're going to hear a bit about John's journey to writing this and his involvement in France mission. So, John, it's good to see you.
And you, Callum, always is.
Thank you very much.
You realise you are my fashion icon,
Of
always.
Course. I mean, where's your teddy bear fleece tonight? I can't see it.
It's in the wash.
It's in the wash, okay. You do have to be careful with washing these, apparently, as the cameraman can probably also attest. Okay, so, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes,
Who
certainly.
is John?
Okay, well, I'm a local boy. I was born about 100 yards, as the crow flies, from where we're sitting now.
Okay.
Not in a road, before you jump to conclusions.
No, busy road.
Indeed, but in one of the houses just beyond.
Okay.
I was the eldest of 7 children. And, so lived in Bebington until, I guess, primary school, and then secondary school was actually in Birkenhead. And then I went to university.
Where was that?
Top place, absolutely top place, Aberystwyth. I had a wonderful time there. It's a wonderful place. And I did French there at Aberystwyth. Part of that was a year abroad, actually. It was compulsory, but I'm so glad that it was. Because I had a really, really life-changing experience during that year.
Okay. And where was that?
Well, it was in a place called Moulins. Moulins is really right in the middle of nowhere. It's bang in the centre of France. It's in the Allier. It's a little, it's reasonable sized market town, I guess. But yeah, that's where I was. And I worked at a secondary school, the Lycée Bonville.
Okay. And then your teaching career has then been on the Wirral?
Yes, it followed on. I made the decision. I got my first job in Doncaster in South Yorkshire. Are you familiar with Doncaster?
I'm not. I can't say I've ever been.
Ah, good.
Am I missing out?
Yeah, I'm one of the few people who's had a week's holiday there.
Okay.
Yeah, I went. I can recommend it thoroughly. So I started teaching there. I moved back to Birkenhead to St Anson's, where I'd been a student, and I worked there for a few years. Then I was head of French over at St Edward's in Liverpool. And while I was there, I started getting involved in development work for schools. It was round about the era when schools were starting to compete with each other. So I was involved in the publicity side as well when I was there.
Yeah.
My daughter Rachel was born in I better get this right. 1991. I married Caroline, my wife, in 1989, just to be absolutely clear on that.
Yeah.
With Rachel being born, I wanted to work at a school nearer to home. So I got a job at the local high school, and I was there for 4 years. And after that, I think I became head of board. I became head of boarding at a Christian boarding school in Hoylake, right on the blunt end of the peninsula of the Wirral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, that's.
And how long were you there?
I was there for 18 years.
Okay.
Yeah, 18 years. Caroline was there longer.
Yeah.
For reasons I'll explain later.
Yeah. Okay. You both put in a good stint.
It was a good stint, yes.
Very good stint. Okay. And now I know that you enjoy writing. And obviously this is very evident, after 3 books that we've got here. But can you tell us a bit about John the author? How did John the author come into being?
Well, I think in my first year of teaching, I was inspired by the head of English at the school to explore writing as a hobby. And I actually did write I wrote a short story found it in the loft last year when we were moving house, and I've kept it. It's not great, but at the time, I was very pleased with it.
It didn't end with, and I woke up and it was all a dream, which is what all of my writing at school seemed to end with.
Oh,
do you know? It was a bit of a trend.
If I'd spoken to you, I would have ended it that way. Yeah, absolutely.
Inspiration.
Yeah. Went on from there. Really started at St Edward's when I was there, and I was involved in press releases and those kind of things. But it really took off when I moved to the local high school. And we had a problem. We had falling roles. At least one member of staff I remember being made redundant after my first year there. We just had, at the end of that year, we had a training day, a really valuable training day. As teachers will tell you, they're not all that common. But we had a really valuable one about positive or assertive discipline. And I did see the potential in this on a broader basis. So I wrote a number of targeted press releases that matched the politics of the paper I was sending them to. Excuse me. So the Telegraph got a different one to the Independent, and the Times got a version as well that suited them, so much so that they didn't change a great deal of it when they published it. It was a broadsheet. Do you remember them? Too young.
No, I do remember broadsheets.
Oh, that's good. That's good to know. So it got a quarter page in the broadsheet of the Times. Also got on telly. It was on your current employers, BBC, and ITV took the story up as well. So we got an awful lot of coverage. And the result was the 5-year plan that they'd given me at the start of the school year was redundant because we were oversubscribed for the coming September. Yeah. We had so many people wanted to come. One lady rang up the school. We're selective on the Wirral, rightly or wrongly. Have my own views on that. But a lady rang up the school and said, "How do I get my son into your school?" So the head said to her, "Well, you have to get him to fail the 11 plus." And that was it. But we resolved the problem. The great thing was that they forgot to give me a new 5-year plan. So after that, I could do anything I wanted and justify it. Yeah. But I did realise through that the power that actually the written word has. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, and you worked in school travel for a while, is that right?
Yeah, I did, yeah. I'd always promised myself I would retire early from teaching in order to do something else. I've always felt an urge to do something different. And Caroline, my wife, was really good, and because there's obviously a financial risk in doing that. But in 2013, I actually left teaching. And I got involved with a school travel agency in Altrincham. So I worked with them for a while. And after that, again, more writing. I was working with a company called E3 Trails. Okay, and they wrote interactive, or I with them, I wrote interactive trails that involved the experiential learning, really condensed. It's a bit like the concentrate for a squash. You had to reduce the experience into something that could happen in a very limited space of time, but keep that the need for the students to learn it. They actually really enjoyed their learning, didn't feel like it was learning, because they were competing with one another to find a solution. And that was very, very enjoyable to be involved with. It was awful though when I had to say they made me go and work in Normandy for a week, and I had to stay in a chateau for that time. You can imagine.
It's a hard life.
Oh, thanks. Not everybody sees it that way, Colin.
No.
And after that, when I got back, they sent me to Paris for a week.
Of all the places.
Of all the places, but we coped. We got through it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was going to say actually, is that what took you to France? But yeah, clearly it did.
It did indeed, yeah. And all over, really. We wrote a French trail in Liverpool, which again was covered by, I think it was the Independent Television. You probably don't know much about them, being a BBC man.
Yeah. Wow.
But they covered a French trail in Liverpool, because we worked out that not everybody can or wants to go on the school French trip. You can take 40 kids on the coach, and that's about it. So we created a French experience in Liverpool. I'll tell you a secret. It was started out as a kidnapping, but I was told that was very insensitive, so it was reduced to a dog napping. So a dog was napped, somewhere near the Albert Dock. And then I had the animal lovers on my back, so couldn't win.
Okay.
It was a great story, though.
Slightly less sinister than it started, but yeah. Okay. So, on a slightly different note, you prayed for more writing opportunities.
I did. And God really answered those prayers. And I got to write for a school travel magazine. And eventually I was actually doing all the content. And then got a phone call asking, would I like to be the editor? And of course I said I'd be delighted with this promotion. And he said, well, it's not a promotion, to be honest. You're just cheaper than everybody else. So, and you realise I had to up my rates.
Wow.
But great fun, and really enjoyed that writing.
And what were the biblical fiction stories that were published in America?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was a Baptist minister in Wichita, Kansas. You're probably aware, probably been there yourself, with the BBC.
All I can think of is Winchester.
Oh, it's very near there. Yes, think of it that way. Yes.
Same place.
No. They've got a linesman. If you look it up, I'm sure there was a song about. Must have been in football. The Wichita linesman. Some people will remember it. Obviously, you're far too young.
Yeah.
I'll
go with that.
But they were looking for biblical fiction. I called it biblical friction because I used to get the characters in the story, the invented characters, to rub off one another, and they didn't always get on. And it created humour as well as arguments, and it gave put a bit of salt and light into the story. But obviously biblical facts are in those stories are exactly as they are in the Bible. The creative part was what might have happened around it. Yeah.
Of course.
So I had 3 of those published in America, and they were on an app for a good 2 years.
Okay. And then you also wrote the first book in your contemporary parable series, which is this series we've got here.
That's it.
So how did that come about?
Well, somebody actually challenged me and said, "Why don't you write a book?" And I thought, because I haven't got time, because I'm doing all these other things, writing and stuff. And then I found some time, and I started, and it was a bit like Mastermind, really. I'd started, so I'd finish. So it took me over a year, and each of the books has taken me over a year. So the first book was called The Informant. Dealt with some quite unpleasant issues, as well as plenty of humour in there. I have a favourite character. Teachers, by the way, you'll find when you get in touch with your old teachers that they don't have favourites, but you're one of them. You know? And it's a bit like that with characters. My favourite character, he's survived all the stories, is a guy called Jack, and he's an undertaker. And he says early on that in their business they have to laugh, otherwise they wouldn't be able to carry on. And he's the main vehicle for humour in the books.
And he's in all 3.
He is in all 3. Yeah, not all of the characters make it.
Spoiler. And the second one is The Insider. With the motorbike on the front.
That's right. The Insider. It was quite well received, The Insider. It developed the story a little more in a way that it was quite independent of the first book. So a parable is really, I think it means a story that you lie alongside your life, and you look at the story and you see what you can learn from it. So it's a parable in that sense. The first book, by the way, it had a lot of questions that people might ask about Christian faith.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it was like an alpha course for people who don't want to do alpha,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But
With a book.
with having more than one character or more than one voice, you can have people asking those questions, and there they are.
Yeah.
The second one was, the main focus was an outreach week, which they wanted to call Winner Winner Chicken Dinner, because they were serving food afterwards.
Yeah.
And this was Liverpool,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it was perfectly plausible,
Yeah.
you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the third one is The Deceiver.
The third one is a new one, the Deceiver.
Yeah. Which we're going to come back to.
Which we'll come back to, yeah.
Shortly. But as well as these, I believe that there is another element to your authorship.
Are we talking about the elephant in the room, Colin?
Yeah, I believe so.
The elephant in the room, yeah.
Football program.
Yeah, I write. I have a page in the Tranmere Rovers program every home game, and it's the only one in the entire football league that's not about football. Started out being linked to the away venue, and it was a bit of a tourist guide. Pandemic came along, nobody was allowed to travel, so it focused on community. And now it's great, it's in its 5th season, and I'm just allowed to ramble. And as you've probably worked out, I like rambling.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, now the 3 books have got some sort of connection, growing connection probably as they go on, to France. But where's your passion for France come from? Obviously, you said you've been there. Yeah, Michel.
Yeah.
So who's Michel? Who's Michel? How did you meet him? Why was Michel happy to meet you?
Yeah. Well, I'll just make something absolutely clear. He is a bloke, Michel.
Okay.
You know,
Like Michael.
Yeah, exactly like that, only French. Michel. Beautifully, good accent. Yeah. Michel met me at the station when I arrived on my first day in Moulins. And he was driving, well, it was a van that had space in the back for animals, a bit of straw in there and all sorts, because he had a kind of a small holding as well as his teaching, I guess.
So did you go in the back?
Yeah, I was allowed in the back. Yeah, there was a pig sat in the front, so you know. But he gave me my first lesson lived with me the whole of my teaching career. He was really happy, and I asked him why he was happy, and he said, "Well, of course I've come to meet you." And I thought, that's very nice. And he said, "No, it meant I missed an English lesson with the equivalent of year 9. He said, they're my worst one. He said, and I've missed it, so I'm really happy. And do you know, that message stayed with me the whole of my teaching career as well, about the joy of missing a lesson legitimately with your worst class.
Yeah. Wow.
So that was Michel. That's who he is. He was probably the most hospitable, he and his wife, family I've ever met, and particularly to somebody that they had never met. They welcomed me into the home. They live in the countryside. There still isn't a carpet on the floor like you might expect there to be in England, and that struck me at first when I went in. He was professional on a reasonably good salary. Where's the carpet? But the carpet didn't matter in the slightest, because the welcome that they gave to anybody passing by that they invited in was just immense. And I'd never come across that before in England, maybe in just my experience, but that changed the way I looked at life.
Yeah.
And that was incredible. So that was Michel. He's the first reason. I guess the second reason is common with a great many people. France is sophistication, isn't it? It's elegance, it's history, it's fine wine, it's fine food, you know, and I love all that. You know, I can't help it. I love all that.
Yeah.
So much so that I ended up taking coach groups to France quite regularly after that. I did I think I did 8 one year. 8 groups of, sometimes they were adults, sometimes it was a school group. Yeah. But that was quite something. The first one was to Brittany, actually, to a place called Guidel.
Okay. And I seem to remember a funny story, a funny coach group story.
Oh, Michelle. Oh, yes,
coaches.
I told you that one, didn't I? Yeah. Yes, I'd gone over for a holiday with them. That was it. I'd been over for a holiday there. And we'd had a very successful trip to France the week before with a group of kids. It was a school trip. Great one. So, of course, I was full of it. I'm telling them the story about it. And on that particular day, we were going round a castle in France. I don't really recall where it was, somewhere in the middle. And we were going round it, and he attached us to a group who had a guide. And we just melted, we hadn't paid to join the group or anything, but we became accepted as part of it. Yeah. And then the guide sort of took off on a bit of a rant. She had a thing about coach groups and the mess they make. And she was talking about all the French people, the French groups, they're terrible about litter. And so Michelle was just listening to all this, and she was going on and on and on about the mess. It's always there's ice cream wrappers, sweet wrappers, everything on the floor when a coach party comes from a French group. So Michelle said, and the English groups? And she said, oh, the English groups are perfect. There's absolutely nothing left whatsoever. So Michel looked and he said, yes, the English. They eat everything.
They eat everything.
Yeah. So we're talking about Guidel, weren't we?
So Guidel.
I love that place.
In Brittany.
Southern coast, yeah, you ought to go there sometime. Okay. Love it.
And is this where France Mission came in?
Funnily enough, it's not. It's not. I wasn't actually a Christian as I now understand the term. I would probably have said I was at the time, but I was more Catholic rather than that I saw myself.
So how did that happen? How did becoming a Christian
happen? It was we started coming to this church. We lived over the road, and we started coming to this church. And the Catholic priest, to refer to him, I was very worried about whether I should or shouldn't, And he said, yeah, you need to go there. And so I did, and I've been here ever since. But during the first few months, we had a new rector arrived, the Reverend Canon Steve James, as he is now. You'll probably know the good Canon. Yeah. Yeah, and I thought he wanted me to help on this Christianity Explained course that he was doing. But every time, at the end of every evening, the session, I went home and I was just full of it, because suddenly he'd explain things that for years I'd known about, never really understood. And my wife said I was totally unbearable for 3 days. Can you believe that?
Wow.
No, don't answer that question.
Okay.
Caroline, to be honest, subsequently admitted it was a great deal longer than 3 days. Yeah, but I haven't got into that too much.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then you met an old friend at Keswick.
Oh, Keswick, the convention.
Ago.
Yeah,
Tell
that's
us
right.
What's the Keswick convention, for those of us that don't know?
It's a big Christian festival, Bible festival, I guess, annual. Yeah. We're getting up towards the 150th, I think, now.
Okay. In Keswick, the Lake District?
In the Lake District, yeah. Yeah, we've been going for a number of years, but this time I came across a name that I recognised from my university days, from somebody who was on my course. I thought, can't be two people. It's a very Welsh name. And it was him. And I found it. We were quite friendly when we were students, and then I'd lost touch, as you do. So we had a 44-year catch-up. Wow. I don't mean it lasted that long. No. It might have felt like that to him.
But that was the gap.
That was the gap. You got it.
From when you last saw him. Wow.
Yeah, that's right. And he's the Welsh rep for France Mission, and he said, "Why don't you get involved?" And I said, "Well, actually, I'd quite like to." He said, "Well, look out for a vacancy for an area rep." Now, I don't know if he knew something, but that happened. The vacancy came up a few months later, and so I applied, and I managed to be given the role. So that's how France Mission came in. Yeah.
Wow. And then, so what happened then? You wrote a book for France Mission.
Well,
is that how it came about?
Almost. The bones of the book were there already, but I was looking for My books always are a bit like a whodunit. In this series, there's a mystery to unravel as it goes along, a few twists and turns and on the way. So,
and this was the third one, so
and
you'd already written the other two.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And this one needed to be somewhere on a theme around mission, because of the way the series was developing. So the first book was a church plant, basically, in the community in Liverpool. They didn't have they was a scout hut to start with, and they went from there. The second book took the story on after the pandemic and into how they developed into the community. And then the third one, it's a mystery, which I'm not going to tell you too much about, which you can find out.
No spoilers.
No spoilers, no, that's right. The first one had questions a bit like on the Alpha course. The second one actually had a number of Bible passages in, because I felt that the people who enjoyed the first one, who maybe the people who didn't want to do an Alpha course, but they were really interested in the questions, the answers, which you can do through characters. It was an outreach event that attracted people, but there were actual Bible passages in that. Because again, would they look in the Bible to find? Probably not. But when they're part of the story, they'll read them. So yeah, and the third one, well, shall we say it's about a church plant in Europe?
Okay.
Yeah, because that's the next step, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. And do the three books fit together? Obviously, there's similarities with their links to France, but do they all fit together? Can they be read independently from each other?
Yeah, they're designed actually to be independent of each other. But having said that, I did have a couple of people who read all three who came up to me and said it gives us a deeper insight into some of the characters. But then people who've read just one of the books seem quite happy with, with where it is in the story. So they work for both.
Yeah.
For the third one, incidentally, I had some Paul Cook, who's the UK director of France Mission. He put me in touch with some missionaries in Paris who were working there, and I had a very productive session talking with them to make sure that the content, the missionary message in the third book is contemporary.
Yeah.
They were very helpful.
Authenticity across.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. And can we still get all three?
Yeah.
We've only got two here tonight.
The two here tonight. The first two are available on Amazon. They've got ISBN numbers, you know. Wow. It was all done properly and published properly.
Properly,
Oh yes, by a proper publisher.
Author.
I got a proper publisher.
Yeah. Proper publisher for a proper author.
That's right. So there's a Kindle version which they sometimes discount to a very reasonable £1 something. Yeah. Oh, bargain.
Yeah.
But usually they're about £4, and then they obviously they're still doing those in the paperbacks as well. With the new one, I've got a number of author copies that raise a great deal more for France Mission. By buying direct, we're benefiting France Mission. A great deal more. Because there's no Amazon to take their cut.
Yeah.
Big cut.
Yeah, of course. And we're going to hear a little bit about why why supporting France Mission is such an important thing. But why, with The Deceiver, is there so much focus on a church plant? Yeah.
So, church plant is the most efficient, the most effective form of evangelism in my view, and I think in the view of many people, because it establishes a permanent Christian presence in a community. I also had an experience of the Catholic Church in France when I was doing my year abroad. So fair dues, it was quite a while ago, and I know some things have changed. But when I compare that with what happened after I became a Christian and discovered that all my sins were not only forgiven but totally taken away, I didn't get that in the early part of my life, and I think the evangelical presence is vital going forward, where the real message of the gospel is shared with the community that the church is part of. So gospel preaching church, in the community, permanently there, is really what we need.
Okay. And
did I tell you about Taizé?
well, I was just going to say, I remember you telling me about somewhere, and I couldn't remember where it was.
Yeah,
So
it's actually in Burgundy, a place called Taizé. I've known about it for years, but in the autumn we actually went there and had a look. And it's amazing. It's biblically, it's Catholic development. It's a community, and it's worth looking up because it's, as I say, it's biblically sound. They're doing amazing work. So it's good to see that that there are areas of growth, like that within the Catholic Church. And there's also great stories of collaboration between Catholic clergy on the ground, who maybe loan buildings and to developing. So there's cooperation there as well, which is very encouraging. But my experience was a bit dry at that stage, and therefore, I still feel that the evangelical presence is vital to the message.
Absolutely. And how do you think anti-religious laws in France are affecting faith groups? How's that impacting French culture?
Yeah, quite a lot, really. The secular movement has been very strong, separating the church from the state, basically. But I was chatting with my friend in Poitiers, a friend who lives there, and he was telling me that actually that separation, which has led to changes in education affecting kids, it's actually, the kids now see Christianity and biblical Christianity as quite cool, because it's not taught in the school. It's not the same as maths and English that they learn there, or maths and French. It's it's cool.
Yeah.
So that that's good. And also there's obviously a growth going on in the number of evangelical Christians in France at the moment.
Wow.
As well.
We're going to hear a little bit more about that in a minute, I think. But the law-abiding man asked Jesus, "Who is my neighbour?"
Yeah.
What do you want to see happen in France Mission's 50th year?
Yeah. Well, what God's doing in France is where we should start with this, because there's some amazing things going on. There's a new evangelical church planted in France at the moment every 10 days, which is fabulous, and it's led to a need for. They think over the next 10 years, 1,000 new pastors need training, new pastors. Wow. And that's just with the number of churches that there are at the moment. In The Deceiver, the foreword is well worth reading. It was written by Paul Cook, Dr. Paul Cook, I should add. Yeah. And it explains everything very clearly, so much so that my mother-in-law told me that the foreword was a lot better than the book. Wow. Can you imagine that?
So don't read the book, just read the foreword. Was that her...
Really?
That was her verdict?
That was her verdict. I thought it was yours for a moment.
No, of course not. Okay.
Yeah. So it's to have a church for every 10,000 people.
Huge numbers.
But it's such a big country, isn't it?
Yeah,
Such a big country.
Yeah.
So what going back to your question originally, what do we want to see? Well, the fire's been lit, but we need to fan the flames. We need to do all we can to support God's work.
Yeah.
There's different ways we can do that. We can pray. Many of us can contribute financially. But one way that not everybody thinks of is okay, might not be able to go to France myself and work there, but do I know somebody who can? But France Mission facilitate shorter stays, longer term stays, all sorts of things. And for people who are in a position, do you know somebody who might be interested in, who would benefit from doing that? Maybe by asking around, we can actually help by spreading, if you like, spreading the need, so people know it.
Yeah. So those are some of those practical
ways.
Yeah.
So I'd love the book. I'd love the book to take take the message further, wider, and to I don't know what the word is, to boost the enthusiasm and the energy that's already going into it, to lift that to new levels. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, what about your final thoughts as we close? I know you were talking about Michelle earlier.
Yeah, it's a little
How's
bit
Michelle
sad.
doing?
Yeah, we went over in the autumn, Caroline and I, we went to see him and his wife. And he's in the later stages of prostate cancer. So, you know, he's not good. But what saddens me is that unless he responds to the gospel, which he's had from us, unless he responds to it, he'll pass away into the darkness, as so many wonderful people are doing in that country. Made me realise. I was thinking the other day about some of the old hymns, you know, facing a task unfinished, which I think the Gettys did a version of that. If you, I know you're a modern man, you know, you're into the modern stuff.
I know it.
Of course, I am too. Facing a task unfinished, and the words of that are still so relevant today. The other thing is the old one we had a couple of weeks back here. The other old one is. I think it's called "Take My Wife and Let Me Be." Do you know the one?
Yeah, I think I know the one that you're referring to.
Yeah. Well, joking aside, that I mean, it's so easy, isn't it, to think of mission? That's something other people do. Maybe the people at the back of the church will do that, or the people next to me. But it doesn't really affect me. But that's not the case, is it? We're called upon to do everything we can, and that's us ourselves. And it's a bit like the road to Jericho, isn't it? The Good Samaritan story. Let's just make sure we don't pass by on the other side.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, John. And people can get in touch if they want to know more. They want to buy a book directly.
Indeed. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks, John.